All right, Bean, we just wrapped our conversation, guys, with Liz Chernett. We're excited for you to listen to this episode, especially if you have been at all curious about psychedelics as part of your healing journey. Bean, what do you think about what we just heard?
I think she melds the scientific aspects of it and the spiritual nature of it beautifully. So it kind of gives you a taste from both sides. So I think that'll really speak to people who are on the fence about it, because it's not just some hippy dippy who's like, no, just take it and you'll understand. She really explains to you how your brain is processing everything. I'm still processing it.
That's what I really enjoyed is with like understanding the way that these psychedelics like molecularly interact with different parts of our brain. And she does such a good job, guys, of helping us see why we're able to have such mystical experiences, but also such deep personal experiences and doing the work on the parts of ourselves. So I would say if you have ever been curious about how psychedelics work, this is the episode for you. We're excited for you to listen. Here it is.
For sure. Check it out.
Welcome to Signal, the podcast that raises your frequency. I'm Maury Fontanez.
And I'm Melissa Grushka.
And today we have a very special guest, Liz Chernett, psychedelic mentor and alchemy coach. Doesn't that sound like, aren't you dying to know, Bean?
It sounds psychedelic.
Hi, Liz. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. I'm really excited to be there. I so enjoyed binging your guys' podcast. Like, what a joy.
Oh, God.
So much fun.
Are you okay? How are you feeling?
I'm okay. I'm good.
A lot of bean time.
No, it's been great. And it's been a ride.
We have been sort of flirting with this topic over the last few seasons, so we're really excited to dive into it. I mean, the only way that we've ever had an expert is me talking about my psilocybin journeys. So I think it'll be so much better for our listeners to hear about all of the different offerings that exist when you're doing this work. So let's just kick things off. Actually, Bean, I'm going to let you...
I'll kick it off. How about I kick it off?
I'm going to shut up. Yeah.
No, please don't shut up. I just want to know, and I think I always am curious when anybody pursues a route that is, I want to say, less common currently. What made you come to this conclusion? What drew you to this experience and this guiding?
Yeah. Well, there's, I think for pretty much anyone who's doing this work, at least in integrity, it's always personal experiences with psychedelics and with this modality. Right. So that's my story too. I first started taking psychedelics when I was about 16 or 17, actually. And back then it was mushrooms and also morning glory seeds, which is probably not something you've even ever heard of.
No.
But back in like the late 90s, it was like, I remember my brother and I heard like, oh yeah, you can trip on morning glory seeds. And we were like, cool. So we procured some, we made them into a tea. But anyway, so it was like, those early, adolescent years. And of course I was coming to those experiences like any stereotypical teenager, right? Like, this is going to be awesome. And this is going to be so cool. And, there's going to be rainbow elves or who knows, and what ended up happening for me in those earliest experiences, especially with the mushrooms, was that it opened the floodgates to so much processing of things that had happened in my life to date. So, for example, my dad passed away very suddenly when I was 10. I was really close to him. And there wasn't really a lot of spaciousness to grieve. And I sort of bypassed a lot of the grieving process. So when I took mushrooms, I think it was 17. When I was 17, it was like, boom, like it just, all of it opened. But it wasn't all dark. It was like, there was a lot of emotion, like stored, unmetabolized emotion that wanted to flow. But it was also like, all of a sudden, I felt like I was connecting with the more than human realm. It was like the spiritual gates were opening to me. So,
Did your brother have the same experience?
I don't think so. I think his experiences were a little different. Yeah. And we weren't doing tons of tripping. Like, we must have tripped together, but that's not what stands out for me. I actually remember mostly taking mushrooms and just hanging out in my room. And that was a ritual that I started to cultivate and that I would do in college, just alone, like once a quarter. I would take a bunch of mushrooms, hang out in my room. And of course, I had made my room into this very, very trippy place, and I had checkerboarded the walls and had all my posters up and my weird junk art and like God knows, you know. But I would put on my music and I would just like go in with the mushrooms, and I would cry, I would laugh, I would journal, I would dance, I would move, I would shake. And I didn't even know what I was doing. Like I didn't really have the language for it. I just knew that it was good. It was something was moving, something was shifting, something was alchemizing. And, you know, I didn't have that language back then, right? And this is long before now, you know, psychedelics are so much more in the mainstream conversation in context of healing and wellness, right? And people talk about integration. Obviously, this was not a part of my practice. I didn't know the word integration. I didn't know what that meant, you know, but I was just having these experiences, and they were catalytic and they were cathartic. And so I just kept doing it. So kind of just like a funny foreshadowing of what was to come many, many, many years later. But yeah, I had a corporate career for like, you know, 20 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That experience never left you. And I'm thinking, what could have become of you had you not processed through the plant medicine in that way? Like if you never had the opportunity to grieve your father's death in a healthy way.
Right. It's true. And I did do plenty of therapy over the years. And I think that like, you know, therapy is such a solid foundation for just understanding, being able to like kind of string together, you know, a lot of the whys in our lives, the underlying whys that drive, you know, the direction of our lives in many ways, or like how we show up in relationships and things of that nature. But what was so different and so profound about these experiences was really like the spiritual nature, you know, and that's ineffable. It can be very hard to put words to that. But it just really like opened the aperture of my spirituality, which was very profound for me because I grew up kind of with like religion light. I was, you know, I'm Jewish. So it was more like culturally Jewish, you know, like holidays and food and all that good stuff. Yeah. And it was like, it was great. But it wasn't particularly spiritual, you know, I wasn't, So this gave me that sort of entree to spirituality.
Yeah. And so let me ask, what I thought was interesting is that you're a certified coach in this space. So how does one go about getting certified? What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So what that looked like for me, so it's kind of a longer story how I ended up kind of crossing the threshold into, you know, following this path. And I can't remember, Melissa, we may have talked about this when you and I first met. But basically, long story short, through the initiation of becoming a mom, actually, which was, in June 2020, I had a very profound mystical experience. I mean, childbirth is so psychedelic, right?
Mm-hmm. Being a mother is so spiritual in itself. Becoming a mother is so spiritual.
It's so spiritual. Yeah. So I had this really huge opening that really showed me in this way that it took me months to kind of unpack and really more fully sink into that. I was ready. I was ready to like kind of step into the calling to do healing work with others. And I didn't necessarily know immediately what that would look like. But as I sat with it, it was like, it was clear. It was clear that it was going to be with plant medicine. And, you know, and I just started to kind of like try that on with my husband. And he was so encouraging to me, like, oh, you'd be a great coach. You could do this work. And we ended up moving. We were living in New York City at the time, and then we moved to Philly. And kind of one of the silver linings of the pandemic was like I went from being, you know, like most New Yorkers, where it's like life never stops moving, to all of a sudden just having stillness and pause. So it gave me some spaciousness to sort of really sink into what I saw and couldn't unsee, what I heard and couldn't unhear, what I came to know and could not unknow, that I was like moving away from this other path and towards work that was more soul led. And it gave me time to figure out, what does that path look like? So actually, I don't know if either of you were really into the Clubhouse thing. Do you remember Clubhouse during the pandemic?
It's gone, right?
I think it's still going, but it's a lot less popular than it was then.
It was like they tried to cultivate, or maybe it's still going. They cultivated kind of like take chat rooms and take them to the next level where you're coming together. It's a community. You're talking about different things. It's like
Right.
it's like a curated chat room. You have to be, I think, invited in. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so it's basically like, I mean, you explained it well. It's like conference calls on really specific topics. So you can join those like clubs on those topics, and anyone actually can join into a conversation that's happening in real time. And then if you want to be a speaker or if you want to ask a question, then you kind of like, there's a process for that. But so I just started joining all of these Clubhouse conversations about psychedelics, about microdosing, and just like learning and finding my tribe. And I actually, funny enough, I connected on Clubhouse with Lily, who's my podcast co-host and a dear, dear friend and psychedelic soul sister. That's where we met, actually. And then we both were at that time kind of in this process of figuring out our path to get more deeply trained in this work. And so we both ended up enrolling in the Psychedelic Coaching Institute's practitioner training program. So so at the time, so I was, kind of looking into this work and kind of beginning my transition onto this path in 2020. And there were far fewer programs back then. Even in the last 5 years, there have been so many new programs that have been created to train people, because, there's actually like there's so many people looking for healing, right? And so many people who are curious about this as the conversation continues to really kind of proliferate in the mainstream. And we just don't have enough people who are trained to do this work. And really, I mean, like trained to do it in safety and integrity, because a lot of harm can happen with this work as well. Of course, like anything else, there's kind of a darker underbelly. So so for me, I did that program. I was in the second cohort, and it was very rigorous. We learned, all the core competencies of working with these medicines and these molecules. So like all the neurobiology, what is happening in the brain, what's happening in the body, what are all the nuances between these compounds and molecules, and when is it right to use one, when is it right to use another, frameworks for understanding different types of trauma, different types of, kind of protocols or ways to assess trauma, to understand if someone is a good candidate or if there's contraindications medically or with any of the medications that they're on, understanding dosaging protocols. And then, of course, a big part of the training was around understanding the different frameworks for integrating these experiences, because it's all well and good to have a really incredibly powerful breakthrough psychedelic experience. But if we're doing this work with the intention to transmute or heal or expand or step more fully into our power, and after the experience, like nothing really shifts or changes, it's kind of like, well, what's the point, right? Mm-hmm. So really the medicine is the integration. So the training was very, very heavy on that portion of this modality.
So let's get into it, because I think for our listeners, and where I think we're curious, is like, what does happen in the brain? And why is it that all of a sudden you're able to have these spiritual experiences so accessible to you? I know that you work with different psychedelics. So is it different by psychedelic what happens in the brain? Can you walk us through maybe some of the more common ones? Like, for example, people I think are really familiar with psilocybin and ayahuasca, or maybe it's because I live in California. It's like everyone has done both of those things.
Yeah.
So can we just start with those two? What is going on in your brain when you are taking a mushroom? And then with ayahuasca too.
Yes. Okay, cool. So, yes, let's talk about those nuances. Before we go there, I'll just say high level, the big picture of psychedelics, what they do in the brain and the body. The common theme is really around like loosening these rigid patterns in the brain, right? And opening up a window of heightened learning and connection. So there are, of course, nuances of how each of these compounds work, but kind of breaking that down a little bit further, it's like one, helping different regions of the brain actually talk to one another in new ways. So neuronal connectivity between these lobes of our brain that usually don't communicate and connect, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. The second thing is like temporarily while we're in the experience, like relaxing our control centers, right? So the default mode network, right? Like that's the center of like self-talk or the story of me or the story of like, oh, I have to like be back by 4:30 so I can like get the snack and go pick up the kids. It's like all the executive functioning stuff, right? So it just like, it relaxes that part of the brain so that like other parts of our brain and consciousness can come online. In particular, like the right brain, the imaginal brain, which is the portion of our brain that is more connected to the spiritual, right? It's like that's where like the unconscious kind of lies in our physiology. And then the third thing I would say is like turning up the brain's capacity for change and healing through neuroplasticity, right? So there's these molecules are generating certain neurotransmitters or increasing the flow of certain neurotransmitters and in effect creating like new neurons. It's called like dendritic sprouting. So if you imagine like your brain as like a little, you know, you can picture a brain or like little roots and kind of imagine rainbows like at the end of those roots, you know, or little light bulbs at the end of these roots, right? It's like soft clay. So what that means is that we're more neuroplastic. So after this experience with more glutamate, and I know this starts to get really sciencey, but like BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor, with these molecules like increasing in our brain, it makes it easier to sort of like rewire certain thought loops, certain patterns, certain behaviors of thinking or habits. All that stuff just becomes that much easier to shift. Okay, so that's like the high level.
Okay, that's so fascinating. I mean, that in itself, I think, I love what you said about, I want to make sure I understood this correctly. The subconscious lives in the right brain?
Well, gosh, I hope I'm getting that right. But like, yeah, I mean, that's essentially what we're doing with these medicines is like when the left brain and the default mode network comes offline, we're able to like, it's like we're tossing a boulder into the ocean of our unconscious, right? And it's like all that sediment rises up to the top. So it's, so we're able to access more of that unconscious brain, more of the symbol-based thinking brain, right? The imaginal brain, the creative brain. And that's the part of us that connects with divine source.
Right. Wow.
Right.
Okay. So that was general.
That was general. Do we want to keep going? I was going to ask more now about the process of being on a guided journey, or for people on the fence. Did you want to say something first, Bean?
No, I just wanted to get back to the question of like, do different psychedelics do a different kind of molecular thing then?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So the way I would frame this is kind of like two umbrellas of, well, maybe three, including ketamine. But like the first is like the classic psychedelics, like the visionary psychedelics, right? So psilocybin mushrooms, LSD is in this category. Ayahuasca is actually also in this category. DMT is in these categories. So chemically, these are all considered tryptamines. So they're different compounds and they actually have very different signatures. So the energetic signature of ayahuasca, for example, is quite different than the energetic signature of mushrooms. But they're grouped together this way because chemically they're similar in that they work on the serotonergic system. So they all work on these particular receptors in the brain. It's like the 5-HT2A receptor is what it's called, the serotonin receptors. So again, the tryptamines being the serotonergics, they really have this effect of helping the brain become less rigid, some of those like overlearned patterns loosen. And really what I would say is like this opens up this new fountain of like meaning making and like new associations and new stories and new insights, right? There are a lot of differences. Like I said, mushrooms, it's like I'm reticent to be too overly specific or prescriptive about how they're different, because the truth is that each individual person has a different kind of relationship with these medicines. Like, I feel like I feel very deeply connected to the mushrooms. I feel very deeply connected to ayahuasca. I have friends in this space who are like, ayahuasca is my medicine, right? Mm-hmm. Or 5-MeO DMT is my medicine. So it really just depends. I would say ayahuasca tends to be more of like a shadow medicine, right? So it's like, and not holistically, it's not to say that you can't have like I've had absolutely gorgeous euphoric experiences on ayahuasca. But if you think about the way that this plant grows, right, it's no coincidence, right? So it's like it grows in the deep, dark underbelly of the jungle, right? And so there's an embodiment of that, physical characteristic in the energetic signature of the medicine, if that makes any sense. Okay. Cool. And then like the second category of psychedelics, I would say are like, again, we could say three, but the second being like MDMA and some of the phenylethylamines, and these are like the heart openers, right? So they don't necessarily tend to create big visual journeys for people in the same way that mushrooms or ayahuasca do. Although sometimes people do have visuals, on MDMA, but it's more like putting the nervous system into this very deeply kind of like pro-social, pro-trust state, right? So they literally... Yeah, it feels great. It feels amazing, right? We get like all this oxytocin, the love hormone, right? Yeah. We get dopamine. It's like, in this state, and also the blood flow slows to the amygdala. So the amygdala is the part of the brain where we house all of our like fear-based memories and associations, right? So it becomes like less scary to revisit some painful memories and things of that nature, traumas, etc. So it can be very, very powerful for kind of like transmuting trauma, PTSD, things of that nature. Also increases neuroplasticity, but just it works in the brain slightly differently than the classic tryptamines. And then ketamine is kind of its own thing. Ketamine is a dissociative, actually. It's a dissociative anesthetic. And it was actually was used in war times to like help people who are like experiencing pain from like a battle wound or something like that. It also has psychedelic properties. It can be kind of like a fast acting kind of antidepressant. But yeah, it's sort of in its own class a little bit. So
honestly, all of these sound amazing, and I want every single one.
How do you all together, Bean?
Can I do it all at one time?
No.
How do you decide when somebody comes to coach with you? How do you decide which one of these is right for them and their experience and their trauma?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it depends on a lot of factors. I mean, first and foremost is always safety, right? So it's important for me to have an understanding of any like health issues going on, any medications the person may be on. I really don't tend to work with heart openers for any folks who are on SSRIs or SNRIs because there's an increased risk of, like essentially seizure and some cardiac issues and things like that. So it's not something that just for safety purposes and liability purposes and things like that, I really don't tend to work with people, although it's totally possible to taper down from your medication. For some people, they really want to work with MDMA, and so they safely taper down over the course of weeks or even months so that they can have an MDMA experience. Mushrooms are pretty great because there's really very few contraindications whatsoever. Ayahuasca gets a little bit more complicated. It is actually very dangerous to take ayahuasca if you were taking an SSRI or any kind of MAOI, which is a monoamino oxidase inhibitor. So you absolutely cannot do ayahuasca if you are actively taking an SSRI. It's very dangerous. So that's kind of like the first thing is just considering like just from a very pure health standpoint, like what's going on. And then like, where is the person at? Like where are you at? What's going on? What are you working through? What are you working on? What's happening in the relational field? Like what brings you to this work? Right. So it's a little bit of science. It's a little bit of intuition. I do actually combine medicines together. Another medicine that I have a very deep respect for and personal relationship with is 5-MeO DMT.
And that's what you had recommended when I came on, and you thought that would be the best fit for me.
Yeah. I think it would be, I think we talked about mushrooms with the 5-MeO DMT, which is just a beautiful, beautiful combination. 5 is a totally different medicine, totally different energy than any of the other ones we've already talked about. It is actually the most powerful psychedelic on this planet. When used in super high doses. The way that I work with it is a little bit different. Actually, it's very different in that I work with it in low dose in more of a titrated fashion. I think that working with this particular medicine in that fashion is just so beautiful for understanding the sort of layers of our psyche and our different parts and how they work in constellation. And it's actually uniquely, when worked with in this way, an opportunity for the seeker to sort of, again, like titrate and have agency over how deep and how fast and how far they go with the medicine, which is, you know, kind of in contrast to all these other experiences where it's like, you take the medicine and then it's like, okay, let's see, let's go. You know, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to emerge. And not that we know what's going to emerge when we work with Vibe in this way, but we have a little bit more agency, right? We can keep our nervous system in a totally regulated place. And it's just a very integrative medicine. Like I was just in a journey with someone yesterday. You know, we did a very high dose mushroom journey. And then at the end, we spent a couple hours working with the 5, and it was just like everything came so beautifully full circle. And it was just such a beautiful way to sort of distill some of the themes of, you know, the journey that he had been on with the mushrooms, and to really kind of like wrap things up in a bow. And I don't want to like suggest that it's always that like neat and tidy, you know, right. we like those kinds of arcs, but in this case it was, and I tend to work with that medicine in that way, and that sort of cadence and combination with the mushrooms and with MDMA and also with other sacraments.
And I think what's beautiful about your work and your guided journeys is that you help with integration afterwards, which I'm assuming speaks to the alchemy part of your title. It's clear why you're a psychedelic mentor. I mean, you have insane knowledge, you're brilliant, you're intuitive. But I like that you do follow-up sessions after they have their guided journey with you and help them integrate. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. That's the most important part. You know, really? That's like, yeah, it really is. That's really where the magic happens. And actually, before we even get to the integration stage, we do a lot of really deep prep work, because it's like, these experiences are so vulnerable, right? Like we're like the most vulnerable sometimes. I mean, I often hear from people, oh my God, that was the most vulnerable I've ever been in my whole life. And like, what an incredible honor, you know, what an incredible honor to hold that with someone. But they can't go there and feel safe unless we've built trust, unless we've built rapport. So that's the first thing. It's like, we just need to like know one another, and, you know, there needs to be this field, this co-created field of safety. Beyond that, it's like, I guess the metaphor I like to use is kind of like growing a garden, right? So let's say you're like, you know what? I want to have a psychedelic experience. I'm feeling the call. Yeah. It's like when you decide to grow a garden, you don't just like throw seeds in the ground the next day. It's like, well, first you decide what you want to grow, what you want to cultivate. Do you want to do veggies? Do you want to do wildflowers? Do you want to do a mix of both? How fertile is the soil? You might need to like, you know, get on your hands and knees and roll your sleeves up and pull up the weeds, right? You might need to like adjust the pH of the soil, right? So that's kind of like the prep work, right? And I could be a little more specific about that, what that looks like, but that's kind of high level about what it's about as we move through this process of, you know, kind of understanding all the layers going on here in the person's life and their psyche, thought loops, different parts of them that are online, different parts of them that are kind of more latent or kind of like sitting backstage, so to speak, and really getting clear on what it is they're wanting. Because people will come in, it's like, okay, I want this, this, and this. And it's like, when we peel back the layers, there's always like so much deeper there to uncover and to explore. So that's like the first stage. And then I liken the journey itself as kind of like, okay, now we're ready to put the seeds in the ground, right? So it's kind of like the planting of the seeds, which is obviously you can't grow a garden unless you plant the seeds, right? So pivotal, but it's kind of like the shortest part of the process of growing a garden, right? Mm-hmm. And then after the seeds in the ground, it's like, okay, well then we have to water the seeds daily. We have to make sure there's enough sunlight coming in. There might be like some squirrels or some critters. So we might have to like build a little trellis. We might have to bring in some external fertilizer, right? We have to like come out and like talk to the plants and let them know we're here and we're, you know, we're with them. So that's the integration, right? Like that's all the intentionality and the commitment that goes into really anchoring whatever comes through in the psychedelic experience into our lives in alignment with our intentions and with our deepest prayers.
Are you a gardener? You know so much about gardening.
I really don't know anything about gardening, to be honest.
I was like, you know so many details about gardening.
I love that. That's your takeaway. You were like, tell me about gardening.
No, it was a really good analogy. I
agreed.
really got the analogy, but I'm wondering about the spiritual experiences we have with psychedelics. So I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, because you've opened my eyes to the way that the brain is obviously engaging in all of this. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to make a leap, and you tell me if I've got this right. But because we're taking sort of offline the ego, the part of us that's in control, and we're bringing online the subconscious, for those people who do psychedelics and have experiences with their spirit guides, or, you know, for me, I connected to source directly. I know that I did. It felt a certain way. Is that because in your experience, we're always in that connection in our subconscious? You know, we're a part of that larger web, and so we're just able to turn the volume up on it. How do you describe the really incredible spiritual experiences people have when they use psychedelics?
Yeah. I love how you framed that, Maury, like this sort of interconnected web. I mean, that is my belief, absolutely, is that we are inextricable from this tapestry of all life, of all beings, all lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And that's like the oneness that we speak about, or people, you know, kind of wax poetics about. And it can be really hard for us to access that in our day-to-day lives, right? For all the reasons that we've kind of acknowledged. But yes, that's my belief, is that we are never not connected. The question is like, are we tuned in, right? It's like just like adjusting the radio dials to a new frequency or something like that, right? So I think you nailed it, honestly. It's really just about like turning down the volume in certain parts of our brain or certain parts of our persona and our ego, and allowing these other parts of us and these other parts of our, not just our brain, but like our being, like our essence, you know, el duende, like in our heart, like there's an ineffability to it. There's a degree to which we can describe it neurologically, and then there's a degree to which like words completely fail, right? And there's a great mystery, and that's ultimately, I think, a big part of what this work is about. Is it's about like finding peace with the great mystery and like the great uncertainty of everything, and not like trying to battle that or figure everything out all the time, but being able to like find that sense of acceptance and that sense of trust, like in the divine unfolding of things, you know?
And not feeling so alone in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a release, a huge release. Like you can just let it go and just be, I feel like.
And know you're supported.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm curious, in all of the journeys you do, if you see any sort of like through line or a thread that is very similar through each human being that they experience, or is every single journey that you guide completely and utterly different? I'm sure it's a little bit of both, but I'm curious if there's really some sort of through line about humans in general that you've noticed through this work.
Yeah. I would say like the through line is really kind of this idea we just touched on of like understanding the interconnected web or tapestry or whatever word you want to use, that we're all intimately connected in this way that we can't put words to. And beyond that, like sort of like the divine nature of everything, like, right? Like when we can like zoom out, sort of like we start to see like the movie of our lives rather than being like inside the movie or like on the screen. It's like we're in the audience, we're like in the theater, you know, we're like seeing the story from this distance, from this zoom out that allows us to be like, oh, like I'm kind of tired of that story, or oh, I actually want to change how that part goes, right? And like we sort of realize with this newfound sovereignty, or I mean, oftentimes it can be like, it feels sometimes like a cosmic laugh, like it's funny, it's like, oh my god, like this is so ridiculous, like I don't have to, like, actually don't have to live this story anymore, you know, or I don't actually have to believe that anymore, or I actually don't have to like only do this way, or, you know, it's like that zoom out where we just get so much distance. Yeah, but you know, I mean, the truth is, like, all these experiences are so unique, and I feel like, you know, in the years I've been doing this, it's like, wow, I've seen so many different kinds of experiences, and the way that, you know, even like the spiritual realms open for people can be so different and look so different and feel so different, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we have kept you for far too long. I'm just going to ask you this last question on behalf of our listeners. If this is something that you're curious about, you've never tried psychedelics, what would you say is a good sort of baby step? How can you figure out if this is right for you?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is just kind of like read about it, learn about it. There's a lot of great free available content out there nowadays. Yeah, like I'm trying to think. The book that is most widely known is Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great, you know, kind of entryway into this work. There's an organization called Psychedelic Passage. And they're a nonprofit. They do a lot of education on like psychedelics, kind of 101 stuff, and like even just questions to ask a potential guide or facilitator. You know, I think it's really, really, really important if you decide that you want to like move forward with doing this work with someone else, you know, to just make sure that you feel really, really safe with the person you're doing it with. And there's, you know, a series of really great questions and inquiries to engage in with that person. You know, for other people, it might be that like a group, you know, group work is what they're looking for, or feels more resonant in some way. It's just like intuitively they're like, I think I want to go to a retreat, right? So it just depends. But I think the first step is always just kind of like educating yourself. And, you know, I think also like for someone who has absolutely zero psychedelic experience and might feel a little intimidated, microdosing, not everyone is a great candidate for microdosing necessarily, but I think a lot of people are. And that's like a really great way to cultivate a relationship with these plants, because these plants are, you know, they're teachers, they're allies, you know, they're spirits. So when we start to commune with those spirits or allies and build a relationship with them, it just becomes so much more comfortable and natural and generative when we kind of like go in for the big stuff.
Yeah.
And Liz does chemistry calls. I'm sure other guides do the same, where you can call and just kind of feel it out and get a sense of the process and get a sense of your guide and who you're going to be working with and see if it fits.
Exactly.
Liz, I know you said before we started recording, you're launching a new group, right? Like a new way of working in groups with you. But how can people reach you, find out more about you, listen to your podcast? Let us know how to find you.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm based here in Philly, not far from Melissa. And I have a space in my home where I do, you know, one-on-one journey work with folks. But a lot of the work otherwise unfolds, you know, remotely. Our prep work and our integration work unfolds in this format. But the best way to find me is my website, which is kaleidoscopeeyecoaching.com. And that's where you can read a little bit more about my approach. I'll just quickly mention that I'm trained in parts work, a modality called parts work. The specific sort of modality that I use is called inner team dialogue. So it's really about like kind of harnessing all the voices within us. So I bring that into the work a lot. And then I'm also currently training as a Jungian coach. So I've always been drawn to Jungian psychology and depth psychology. So I'm really, really excited about expanding my Jungian toolkit. So I bring that into the work quite a bit. And then, I'm trying to sort of relaunch myself on social media. I'm not super active there, but I'm also active on LinkedIn. But yeah, really the best way to find me is through my website, and you can book a discovery call right there. And then the podcast is kind of wherever you get your pods and listen to your pods, and it's called In Right Relationship. And it is about psychedelics and the sacred. And I do it, as I mentioned, with my dear friend, Lily Eggers, who lives in the Bay Area, and she is a couples therapist.
Amazing. We will
Yeah.
link to those things in our show notes.
Absolutely.
But
Thank
check out
you.
Liz and her work, especially if you're curious, because what a depth of knowledge you have, Liz. And really, I
Right.
think it's so important for people to understand both the science and the spiritual nature of that. So thank you for marrying those things for us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I so appreciate it. And I'll just say further, if you go to my website, you can sign up for my newsletter, and I have an email newsletter where I send out musings and updates of new things I'm working on and bringing to the world. And if it's okay to just share with your listeners a little bit about this group program.
Please.
Awesome. Yeah, it's called The Oracle Within, and it is a mythopoetic integration studio. So this idea for this offering really stemmed from my own deep work with the medicine, especially over the summer. I went really, really deep with ayahuasca, with another medicine called Jurema, and there was this like very loud message that was like just like I even saw it like in neon that was like, it's time to create. So this is very much like sort of my own integration process of creating something and offering it and bringing it out into the world. But the idea is that it's a group program over 9 weeks, and it's going to be 7 live sessions together over those 9 weeks where we blend Jungian and mythopoetic teachings and mythic stories with hands-on play and creativity. So each session will be sort of like a mix of those factors where we dive into some like Jungian ideas and mythic stories and archetypes and gods and goddesses. And then we reflect as a group, sort of like sitting around the proverbial fire together about, you know, how we are expressing these archetypes and these myths, how they're expressing through us and in our own lives. And then we use the rest of the time to actually just play and have fun. So the guided project we're going to work on throughout the program is actually a collage. So we'll be adding layer by layer by layer, and it's not gear. It's like you do not have to be an artist to do this. In fact, this is great for anyone who's like, I like have this creative impulse, but I feel blocked. It's really a great opportunity for, you know, other coaches or healers or guides to learn more of the Jungian mythopoetic. And then it's just an opportunity to play. I think, you know, we really need to sort of like reclaim this sort of childlike play for our well-being. There's just so many pressures of adulting. So yeah, that's what it's all about. And then at the very end, we're going to chop up our collages and they're going to transform into an oracle deck.
Oh, cool. So this is in person. So you'd have to be able to get to you in
No,
Philadelphia.
sorry, I should have clarified that. It's actually remote. So the sessions are going to unfold over Zoom, and I'll send a materials list, and then we'll all be kind of like making in our own little studios. Yeah.
That sounds really fun. All right. And can people find that on your website too?
They can find it on the website. It starts up in January.
Great.
Yeah. So, and there's gonna be a lot of really cool, interesting kindred souls that are gathering there, you know, and people who are interested in these more symbol-based ways of seeing and knowing and making meaning.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing.
Super rad.
Well, Liz, thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for the work you do to heal people at such a soul level. And we look forward to talking to you again. It was really nice to have you with us.